Hello, it's Layperson Lisa with a reflection on the readings for the second Sunday of Easter, also known as Divine Mercy Sunday. So in the Gospel, the apostles are locked in a room. And so it made me reflect, okay, where am I locking my heart from God? Where am I letting fear paralyze me? And it made me think of how sometimes with our relationship with God, we want to serve, right? We want to do. But our first apostolate is a relationship with God, and our second apostolate is the one of action. And so when we're talking about faith, it's belief in action. But to cultivate that belief, to cultivate that virtue of faith, we have to we have to take the time to develop our relationship with God. And so sometimes we're afraid where fear prevents us from sacrificing time to spend time with God. Sometimes wanting to be comfortable. So sacrificing comfort can affect our relationship with God in that, like, oh, God is calling me to do something that is totally not who I am, totally not me, totally not something I can do. And so we can get locked in that room. And so sometimes when God asks us to do something, we just want to hide. We just want to no. Sometimes we can also get locked into who we think that we are. And we're locking ourselves off from being who God created us to be. We're not made like Pope Benedict XVI. He said, we are not made for comfort. We are made for greatness. But so often, the fear of being uncomfortable, the lack of willingness to be uncomfortable because of fear can paralyze us. And so sometimes our hearts are just locked. The doors to our heart are locked off from these things. But these are things that we need to unlock and open our hearts fully so that we can just allow God into our hearts in a greater way. And so when Jesus enters the room and says, "Peace be with you," when we dive into a relationship with Jesus, when we really spend time, when we are willing to be uncomfortable, when we are willing to be transformed, then He gives us this supernatural peace that lies in our heart despite circumstance, despite what is going on. And that can allow our the peace that we have flow out unto others. And so sometimes, in the reading, in the gospel, Jesus says, those who, basically he's talking about forgiveness, right? And so sometimes we can lock our hearts off from forgiving others. And on this Divine Mercy Sunday, God just wants us to open our hearts to be willing to forgive others. But He also wants us, if there's something that we've been holding on to, we brought to the Sacrament of Reconciliation, but we still are having trouble forgiving ourselves, He wants His divine mercy, His divine compassion to give us the confidence that when we bring something to reconciliation, we are forgiven. When we come with a contrite heart, we are forgiven. And to have that confidence in Him, because sometimes when we can lock our hearts up and not receive the forgiveness that God wants to give us through the Sacrament of Reconciliation. And in this gospel, it is the initiation of the institution of reconciliation, when He says, those that you forgive will be forgiven, and those that you sins that are not forgiven will not. And so we have this sacrament where God just wants to send forth His compassion, His mercy upon us, and He just wants us to fully open our hearts to Him. And He also wants us to fully open our hearts to receiving His divine love, receiving His infinite love, His unfathomable love. Because so often we can be we can live like we are not loved. We can let maybe rejections that we experience in the world kind of cause us to have an identity of maybe of being unloved. But no, we have to have confidence in the love that God has for us. So often we can, when we sin, when we fall into bad habits and vices, we can listen to the devil and call ourselves by that vice or sin. But no, God calls us by name. God instituted the Sacrament of Reconciliation so that we can be back in his embrace when we choose to do something wrong. But we can choose to go to the sacrament and just be wrapped up in his loving arms again. And so where are you locking your heart off from God? Are you not allowing your heart to be penetrated by his love? Are you not allowing your heart to make time to having a relationship with God by giving him time each and every day and prioritizing that time? We're busy, but we have to prioritize what is important. And the most important thing in our lives is our relationship with Jesus, because from our relationship with Jesus, fruits flow. From our relationship with Jesus is how he calls us to love others. He gives us that peace. He gives us that joy that can only come from him. Our hearts locked off to comfort, that we don't want to be uncomfortable, that this is who I am, not this person that does this. No, you are made for greatness. You are made for a task, a purpose that only you can do, and God calls you to it and he equips you. But we often have to say yes to being uncomfortable. And so where are you locking your heart off from God? He wants to unlock it. He wants you to turn that key and unlock it so that he can give you his peace, and he wants you to be open to all the love that he has for you.